Today, our mission is to explore something really fascinating. We're looking at sources centered on this idea of a divine coding inside humanity.
Exactly. It's described as this kind of blueprint, right?
Yeah.
Spiritual, biological, but the sources suggest it's been, corrupted
Yeah.
by deception mainly.
Right, but also that it can be reawakened through
Yeah.
truth. And the sources we're drawing on are pretty broad biblical stuff, ancient texts, archaeology, and even some of the newer epigenetic science, which is interesting.
It really is. And what this means for you, listening, is potentially quite profound. We might uncover some surprising things about identity, potential,
Exactly.
maybe challenge some assumptions.
Definitely. So, okay, let's start at the beginning, the origin point.
Hmm.
These sources keep bringing up Genesis 1, verses 26, 27.
Yeah.
Made in the image of Elohim.
Hmm.
What are they suggesting this really means for us? Like fundamentally, is it spiritual, physical?
It seems to be deeper than just resemblance. The sources really emphasize the breath of life.
Hmm.
From Genesis, that divine spark that gave humanity this unique blueprint, spiritual and biological.
Okay.
But then they contrast this original state. They bring up theories about ancient tampering, genetic manipulation even.
Ah, right. That's where things like the Nephilim come in.
Exactly. Often described as these, corrupted offspring from unnatural mixing. And this concept of fallen DNA.
Fallen DNA, like a degradation of the original code.
Precisely. A corruption of that divine blueprint. And what's really wild is how these ancient ideas, they're finding echoes now in epigenetics. This idea that our potential isn't just spirit, it might be encoded biologically. A blueprint that can be, turned on or off.
Wow.
And the Hebrew understanding mentioned in the sources breaks it down neatly. Soul, spirit, flesh, all interconnected in this design.
That's quite a picture of the original design, and pretty sobering to think it could be tampered with. So if this blueprint is under attack, how do the sources say this overwriting happens today? How is our divine DNA, so to speak, being messed with now?
Well, the materials point to some really pervasive influences. Things trying to obscure or rewrite that code. Think about prevailing ideologies, things that distort truth. Even chemical exposures are mentioned. And this widespread confusion around identity, which kind of disconnects us from who we fundamentally are.
And this isn't new, according to these sources.
Not at all. They draw direct lines back to ancient warnings.
Yeah.
The Tower of Babel story.
Right, humanity trying to build its own system.
Exactly. Apart from the divine design, or the days of Noah, that often gets linked to this idea of a hybrid agenda.
A hybrid agenda, like continuing efforts to corrupt the original human line.
That's the idea presented, yeah. A dilution or corruption. And texts like Enoch or Jubilees, they're cited for having detailed warnings about these very things throughout history.
Okay, that paints a pretty intense picture of these influences. But if the code can be obscured, the big question is, how can it be reactivated? This leads to the idea of awakening, right? And the remnant. Who are they? How are they identified? Is it just belief?
It seems to be much more inherent than just belief. The sources highlight that this remnant isn't just defined by what they say they believe. It's more about inherent qualities, things like spiritual frequency.
Spirit frequency, like a resonance.
Yeah, an energetic alignment with divine truth. Also sharp discernment, being able to see truth when there's so much deception.
Okay.
And this interesting concept of divine preservation,
Yeah.
like an inherent protection and alignment with that original design.
So not just belief, but innate qualities. What about practical steps? How does someone awaken?
The sources suggest some really actionable things. Prayer, obviously. Fasting for spiritual clarity. Grounding practices are mentioned, reconnecting with the earth. Actively rejecting lies, false narratives.
Consciously choosing truth.
Right. And this idea of restoring the temple, basically. Taking care of your body and mind as the vessel for this code. And there's a point made directly to the listener, to you. If you often feel different, set apart, misunderstood by the current system. These sources suggest that feeling might actually be a sign of this divine preservation, this unique alignment already at work within you.
That's a really powerful reframing. So pulling it all together, the core message seems to be about rediscovering something innate, an original design within us.
Absolutely. The fundamental takeaway from these sources is pretty clear. You weren't actually meant to fit into a fallen system. You're created to rise, reclaim your heritage, and reflect the Most High. Put quite bluntly, this isn't evolution. This is awakening.
That's a strong statement. Awakening, not evolution. So for you listening, what does this understanding spark in terms of your own identity, your purpose? Definitely something to mull over.